The sound of rushing water filled Penelope Kingston's ears too late, and by the time she looked up from adjusting her camera lens, the wall of muddy brown water was already bearing down on her position in the narrow canyon. She had been so focused on capturing the perfect photograph of the sunset casting golden light across the red rock formations that she had ignored the darkening sky to the west, where storm clouds had been gathering over the mountains. Now, in August of 1887, in the rugged badlands of western Dakota Territory, her artistic ambition might cost her everything. The flash flood roared toward her like a living beast, carrying debris and boulders in its churning mass. Penelope grabbed her precious camera and tripod, stumbling backward as the first rush of water hit her ankles with surprising force. The current immediately threatened to sweep her feet out from under her, and she realized with cold terror that she would not make it to higher ground in time. The water was rising with impossible speed, already reaching her knees and climbing. Her heavy skirts, practical leather boots, and the weight of her equipment conspired against her as she struggled toward the canyon wall. Then she heard the thunder of hooves, different from the roar of the flood. A rider appeared at the canyon's edge above her, silhouetted against the storm clouds. Without hesitation, the cowboy urged his horse down the treacherous slope, navigating rocks and loose earth with the confidence of someone who had spent his entire life in the saddle. He reached her just as the main body of the flood arrived, the water now at her waist and rising. "Give me your hand," he shouted over the deafening rush of water. Penelope tried to reach up, but her camera equipment held her back. The cowboy, seeing her predicament, made a split-second decision. He grabbed her around the waist with one powerful arm, hauling her up and across his saddle with strength that left her breathless. Her camera and tripod disappeared into the churning brown water as the horse lunged toward higher ground, its muscles straining with the effort of carrying two people up the steep incline while fighting against the current that now reached its chest. The horse, a magnificent bay gelding, somehow found purchase on the slippery rocks and powered upward. Penelope clung to the cowboy's arm, feeling the hardness of muscle beneath his wet shirt. Water streamed from both of them as the horse finally crested the canyon rim, carrying them to safety just as the flood reached its peak below, filling the entire canyon floor with a raging torrent that would have surely killed her. The cowboy pulled his horse to a stop a safe distance from the edge and carefully helped Penelope down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet touched solid ground, and he steadied her with gentle hands on her shoulders. She looked up at her rescuer, taking in his appearance for the first time. He was tall and lean, with broad shoulders and the weathered tan of someone who worked outdoors. His eyes were a striking shade of blue-green, like the shallow waters of a mountain lake, and his dark brown hair was plastered to his head from the rain that had begun to fall in earnest. He appeared to be in his mid-20s, perhaps a few years older than her own 22 years. "Are you hurt, miss?" he asked, his voice carrying concern and a slight drawl that spoke of time spent in Texas before coming north to the Dakota Territory. Penelope shook her head, then immediately contradicted the gesture by bursting into tears. The shock and terror of her near-death experience caught up with her all at once, and she found herself sobbing uncontrollably. The cowboy looked momentarily uncertain, then pulled her gently against his chest, one hand coming up to pat her back awkwardly. "You are safe now," he said quietly. "I have got you. You are safe." His shirt was soaked and smelled of horse, leather, and rain, but Penelope did not care. She pressed her face against the solid warmth of his chest and cried until the worst of the fear had passed. When she finally pulled back, embarrassed by her display, she found him looking down at her with something like understanding in his unusual eyes. "I am so sorry," she managed to say, her voice shaking. "My camera, all my plates, everything is gone. Weeks of work just gone." "Better your camera than your life," he said practically. "Come on, we need to get you somewhere dry. My ranch is not far from here, maybe 3 miles. Can you ride?" Penelope nodded, though in truth she had limited experience with horses. The cowboy swung back into his saddle with easy grace, then reached down to pull her up behind him. She settled herself as modestly as possible, acutely aware that her wet skirts were clinging to her legs and that she would have to put her arms around this stranger's waist to keep from falling off. "Hold on tight," he said, and she felt rather than saw the slight smile in his voice. "Duke here is sure-footed, but the rain is making everything slick." Penelope wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him even through his wet clothes. The cowboy clicked his tongue and the horse moved forward at a careful walk, picking its way across the rocky terrain. The rain fell steadily now, soaking them even further, but it was nothing compared to the terror of the flash flood. "I have not even thanked you properly," Penelope said after a few minutes of silence broken only by the sound of rain and the horse's steady footfalls. "You saved my life. I do not know how to repay such a debt." "No debt," he said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." "I do not think that is true," Penelope replied. "You risked your own life to save mine. You did not even know me." "Well, maybe it is time we fix that," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice again. "I am Kellan James. I run a small ranch about an hour's ride from Fargo, though we are a good ways from there now. I was checking on some cattle that had wandered into these badlands when I saw the storm coming in and headed back. Lucky for you, I took this route." "I am Penelope Kingston," she replied. "Though everyone calls me Penny. I came out from Boston 3 months ago to photograph the Western Territories. I have been staying at a boarding house in Fargo and taking trips out into the countryside to capture images of the landscape." "Boston," Kellan repeated thoughtfully. "That is a long way to come with a camera. Your family must be worried about you out here alone." Penelope hesitated before answering. "I have no family left. My parents died 2 years ago in a house fire. I used my small inheritance to purchase camera equipment and travel west. I had always dreamed of documenting the frontier before it disappears completely. The railroad is bringing more settlers every month, and I wanted to capture the wilderness while it still exists." She felt Kellan's body tense slightly beneath her arms. "I am sorry about your parents. That must have been hard." "It was, but photography helped me through the grief. There is something about capturing a moment forever, preserving it exactly as it was, that brings me peace. Or at least, it did until I lost all my equipment in that flood." Despite her best efforts, her voice broke on the last words. "We will see what can be done about that," Kellan said. "Fargo has a good general store. They might be able to order you new equipment from back east." "That would take months and cost more money than I have left," Penelope said bleakly. "I spent most of my funds on the equipment I just lost, and the rest on my room and board. I had been hoping to sell some of my photographs to Eastern magazines and newspapers, but I had not made any sales yet." They rode in silence for a while, the rain beginning to ease as they left the badlands behind and entered rolling grassland. Penelope could see cattle in the distance, dark shapes against the green prairie. The sun was setting now, turning the western sky brilliant shades of orange and pink where the storm clouds were breaking up. It was exactly the kind of scene she loved to photograph, and the loss of her camera hit her anew. Kellan's ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was modest but well-maintained, with a sturdy 2-story house, a large barn, and several outbuildings. A split-rail fence enclosed a corral where several horses stood with their heads down against the last of the rain. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, a welcoming sight in the gathering dusk. "Welcome to the Double J," Kellan said as he guided Duke toward the barn. "It is not much, but it is home. Let me get you inside and dried off, then we can figure out what to do next." He dismounted first, then helped Penelope down, his hands strong and steady on her waist. Her legs were stiff from riding, and she stumbled slightly. Kellan caught her easily, holding her upright until she found her balance. For a moment they stood very close, and Penelope found herself looking directly into those remarkable blue-green eyes. Something passed between them, a spark of connection that made her breath catch in her throat. "Thank you," she whispered, not entirely sure what she was thanking him for anymore. Kellan seemed to shake himself slightly, then stepped back. "Let me take care of Duke, then I will get you settled. The house is unlocked, just go on in and make yourself comfortable. There should be towels in the kitchen." Penelope made her way to the house, while Kellan led his horse into the barn. The interior was neat and surprisingly well appointed for a bachelor's home. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, and comfortable-looking furniture arranged near the hearth. Stairs led up to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was clean and organized, though there was a decidedly masculine feel to the space. She found towels where Kellan had said they would be, and was attempting to dry her hair when he came in from the barn. He had removed his wet outer shirt, and was wearing only a thin undershirt that clung to his muscular frame. Penelope quickly averted her eyes, feeling heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire now crackling in the hearth. "I will put coffee on," Kellan said, seemingly unaware of her discomfort. "And I can heat up some stew from last night if you are hungry. It is not fancy, but it will warm you up." "That sounds wonderful," Penelope said gratefully, "though I feel I should not impose on you any further. If you could loan me a horse, I can ride back to Fargo tonight." Kellan turned to look at her, his expression incredulous. "In the dark after what you have been through? Absolutely not. You will stay here tonight and I will ride you back to town in the morning. You can have my room upstairs. I will sleep down here by the fire." Penelope opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. The truth was she was exhausted, still shaking from her ordeal, and the thought of riding several miles in the dark terrified her. "That is very kind of you," she said instead, "but I do not want to put you out of your own bed." "You are not putting me out of anything," Kellan said firmly. "Now sit down by that fire before you catch your death of cold, and let me get you something warm to eat." Penelope did as she was told, sinking gratefully into one of the chairs near the fireplace. The heat felt glorious against her chilled skin, and she held her hands out toward the flames. Kellan moved around the kitchen with efficient ease, stoking the stove, putting coffee on to boil, and heating up a pot of stew. He had changed into dry clothes, she noticed, and his hair was beginning to dry in unruly waves. "You live here alone?" she asked, watching him work. "Most of the time," Kellan replied. "I have 2 ranch hands who help with the cattle, but they have their own place about a mile from here. It is just me in the main house. Has been for about 3 years now since I bought this land and built the place up." "You built this yourself?" "With help," he admitted. "But yes, most of it is my own work. I came up from Texas with some money saved and a dream of running my own operation. The Double J is small compared to some of the big ranches around here, but it is mine, free and clear." There was pride in his voice, and Penelope found herself respecting his independence and work ethic. "It is beautiful," she said sincerely. "You have done well for yourself." Kellan brought her a bowl of stew and a cup of strong black coffee. The stew was simple but hearty, full of beef and vegetables, and it was exactly what she needed. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the crackle of the fire and the sound of rain on the roof the only noises. "Can I ask you something?" Kellan said after a while. "What made you want to come out here? I mean, really." "A woman alone from Boston, traveling the frontier with a camera, that is not exactly common." Penelope set down her empty bowl and wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, gathering her thoughts. "After my parents died, I realized I had been living the life they wanted for me, not the life I wanted for myself. They had expected me to marry well, settle down, become a proper Boston society wife. But I had always been fascinated by photography, ever since I saw my first daguerreotype as a child. The idea that you could capture a moment, preserve it forever exactly as it was, that seemed like magic to me." She paused, staring into her coffee. "After the fire, after the funerals and the settling of estates, I found myself with a small amount of money and no obligations. I could have stayed in Boston, found some clerk or shopkeeper to marry, lived a safe and predictable life. But I kept thinking about all the things I would never see, never experience, never photograph, so I packed up my equipment and came west." "That took courage," Kellan said quietly. "Or foolishness," Penelope replied with a sad smile. "Today would suggest the latter. I was so focused on getting the perfect shot that I ignored every sign of danger. If you had not come along when you did, I would be dead now. Perhaps I am not cut out for this after all. One mistake does not mean you should give up on your dreams," Kellan said firmly. "Everyone who comes out here makes mistakes. The lucky ones learn from them. You were unlucky with the timing, but lucky that I was nearby. That is just how life works sometimes." Penelope looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the handsome face to the steady, practical wisdom beneath. "You are very kind," she said softly, "and very good at rescuing foolish photographers." "Well, you are my first photographer rescue," Kellan admitted with a smile. "I have pulled calves out of mud, helped birth foals, and once wrestled a young bull that had gotten himself tangled in fence wire. But this is my first-person rescue. I am glad I was there." "So am I," Penelope said, and meant it with her whole heart. The rest of the evening passed pleasantly. Kellan found some clothes that would fit her better than her wet things, an old shirt and pants that had been left behind by a former ranch hand. They were too large, but dry, and Penelope gratefully changed into them in the upstairs bedroom while Kellan stayed downstairs by the fire. When she came back down, he had hung her wet clothes near the hearth to dry. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their lives. Kellan told her about growing up in Texas, working on his father's ranch until wandering fever had taken him north to the Dakota Territory. He spoke of long cattle drives, harsh winters, and the satisfaction of building something with his own hands. Penelope told him about Boston, about the excitement and terror of traveling west alone, about the places she had been and the photographs she had taken. "I wish I could show you my work," she said wistfully. "I had some truly beautiful shots of the Badlands and a series of portraits of Native American families I met near the Standing Rock Agency. They were kind enough to let me photograph them, and the images were striking. And now they are all gone, washed away." "Maybe not all of them," Kellan said thoughtfully. "Did you not say you were staying at a boarding house in Fargo? You must have taken photographs before this trip. Are they all gone too?" Penelope sat up straighter, hope flickering in her chest. "No, you are right. I have several dozen plates back in my room that I have already developed. Not my recent work, but still, they are something. I had almost forgotten about them in all the excitement. There, you see, not everything is lost. And as for new equipment, maybe there is a way to earn the money you need. Fargo is growing fast. Lots of families coming in on the railroad. I bet plenty of them would pay for a professional photographer to take their portraits." "That is actually not a bad idea," Penelope said, her mind already working through the possibilities. "I would need a camera first, though. Even a simple one would cost more than I have right now." "We will figure something out," Kellan promised. "But for now, you should get some rest." "You have had quite a day." Penelope realized suddenly how exhausted she was. Every muscle ached and her eyes felt heavy. "You are right. Thank you again, Kellan, for everything. I do not know what I would have done without you." "Good thing you do not have to find out," he said with a smile. "Sleep well, Penny." She climbed the stairs to his bedroom, which was as neat and practical as the rest of the house. The bed was large and comfortable, covered with a heavy quilt. She crawled under the covers, expecting to lie awake replaying the terrifying events of the day. But instead she fell asleep almost immediately, feeling safer than she had in months. Penelope woke to the smell of bacon and coffee. Sunlight streamed through the window, telling her she had slept much later than usual. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, which had dried overnight, and made her way downstairs. Kellan was at the stove, cooking breakfast with the same efficiency he had shown the night before. "Good morning," he said cheerfully. "I hope you are hungry. I made enough for an army." "Good morning," Penelope replied, feeling suddenly shy in the light of day. "You did not have to make breakfast." "I always make breakfast," Kellan said. "I just made extra today. Sit down, it is almost ready." They ate together at the table, and Penelope found herself studying Kellan in the morning light. He was even more handsome than she had realized, with strong features and an easy smile. More than that, there was a kindness about him, a genuine goodness that showed in everything he did. "I was thinking," Kellan said, setting down his coffee cup, "about your situation with the camera equipment. I have a little money saved up, not a lot, but enough to help. I could loan you what you need to get a basic camera and some supplies. You could pay me back once you start taking those portraits." Penelope's first instinct was to refuse, but she forced herself to consider the offer seriously. She did need help, and Kellan was offering it freely. "That is incredibly generous," she said slowly. "But I could not possibly accept unless we drew up proper papers. I will not take advantage of your kindness." "Fair enough," Kellan agreed. "We can stop by the bank in Fargo and do it all legal-like. Say 2% interest over a year. Does that sound reasonable?" "More than reasonable," Penelope said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "You are saving me twice over, it seems." "I like to be thorough," Kellan said with a grin. The ride back to Fargo was pleasant, with Penelope once again seated behind Kellan on Duke. The sky was clear and blue, washed clean by the previous day's storm. They talked easily during the journey, and Penelope found herself hoping the ride would last longer. There was something peaceful about being with Kellan, something that made her feel grounded and safe in a way she had not felt since before her parents' deaths. When they reached Fargo, the town was bustling with activity. Located along the Red River, Fargo had grown rapidly since the Northern Pacific Railway had arrived in 1872. The main street was lined with buildings, some brick, some wood, housing everything from general stores to saloons to churches. The boarding house where Penelope stayed was on a quieter side street, a 3-story structure run by a widow named Mrs. Martha Henderson. Kellan helped Penelope down from Duke in front of the boarding house, and she was immediately accosted by Mrs. Henderson, who had been watching from the front window. "Penelope Kingston, where have you been?" the older woman demanded, rushing out onto the porch. "You were supposed to be back yesterday evening. I was about to send someone looking for you." "I am so sorry, Mrs. Henderson," Penelope said contritely. "I was caught in a flash flood in the Badlands. I lost all my equipment, and Mr. James here was kind enough to rescue me and provide shelter for the night. Mrs. Henderson's stern expression softened as she took in Penelope's disheveled appearance and the sincere look on Kellan's face. A flash flood. My dear girl, you could have been killed. Come inside at once. You need tea and a proper rest. Actually, Mrs. Henderson, we were hoping to go to the general store first, Penelope said. I need to replace my camera equipment, and then I was thinking of offering portrait services here in town. Do you think there would be interest? Interest? My dear, there would be tremendous interest, Mrs. Henderson exclaimed. I have been saying for months that Fargo needs a proper photographer. The man who used to come through twice a year moved to Bismarck, and everyone has been complaining. If you set up shop here, you would have more business than you could handle. That settles it then, Kellan said. Let us go see what the general store has available. The general store was a large establishment run by a Mr. Harold Peterson, a shrewd but fair businessman who had come to Fargo in the early days and prospered along with the town. He listened to Penelope's needs with interest, then shook his head regretfully. I can order what you need from Chicago, he said. But it will take 6 weeks at least, maybe 2 months. I do not keep camera equipment in regular stock, not enough demand for it. Penelope's face fell, and Kellan could see her fighting back tears of disappointment. Then Mr. Peterson held up a hand. However, he continued, I might have a solution. About 2 months ago, a photographer passed through here on his way to the Montana Territory. He was in a hurry and wanted to lighten his load. He sold me some of his older equipment, said it still worked fine, but he had upgraded to newer models. I bought it thinking I might be able to resell it eventually. Let me go check the back room. He disappeared into the rear of the store, and Penelope grabbed Kellan's hand, squeezing it tightly. Oh, I hope he has something usable, she whispered. Kellan squeezed back, enjoying the feel of her smaller hand in his. He had found himself thinking about Penelope all morning, about her courage and determination, about the way her face lit up when she talked about photography. He was drawn to her in a way he had never experienced before, and the realization both excited and frightened him. Mr. Peterson emerged carrying a wooden box, which he set carefully on the counter. This is what I have. It is a Rochester optical camera, about 5 years old but in good condition. Comes with a tripod, a dozen glass plates, and some developing chemicals. The photographer threw in a couple of books about photographic techniques too. Penelope opened the box with trembling hands and examined the contents. Kellan watched her face as she carefully inspected each item, her expression growing more hopeful with each piece. This is wonderful, she finally said. Not as good as what I lost, but more than adequate for portrait work. How much do you want for it? Mr. Peterson named a price that made Penelope's face fall, but Kellan had expected as much. He stepped forward, pulling out a leather wallet. We will take it, he said firmly. And we will need to set up a darkroom. What else would she need for that? Over the next hour, Mr. Peterson helped them assemble everything Penelope would need for a complete portrait photography operation. Kellan paid for it all without hesitation, despite Penelope's protests. They drew up a proper loan agreement at the bank, witnessed and signed, with terms that Penelope could manage once she started taking portraits. You have already done so much for me, Penelope said as they carried the equipment back to the boarding house. I do not know how to thank you. You can thank me by making a success of this photography business, Kellan said, and maybe by having dinner with me tonight. There is a decent restaurant on Main Street. Nothing fancy, but the food is good. Penelope smiled up at him, her eyes bright with happiness. I would like that very much. Dinner that evening was a revelation for both of them. They talked non-stop, discovering shared interests and perspectives that seemed remarkable given their different backgrounds. Kellan found himself fascinated by Penelope's artistic vision, the way she saw beauty in unexpected places. Penelope was drawn to Kellan's steady strength and his genuine interest in her dreams. "I should get back to the ranch tonight," Kellan said reluctantly when dinner was over. "I have cattle to check on, and my hands will be wondering where I disappeared to. But I was thinking maybe I could come back to town this weekend to see how you are settling in." "I would like that," Penelope said softly. "Very much." Kellan walked her back to the boarding house, and they stood on the front porch for a long moment, neither wanting to say goodbye. Finally, Kellan took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Until this weekend," he said. "Until this weekend," Penelope echoed, feeling her heart race at the touch of his lips on her skin. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Penelope set up her darkroom in a corner of the boarding house's basement, with Mrs. Henderson's enthusiastic approval. She spent a full day organizing her equipment and practicing with the new camera to familiarize herself with its quirks. Then she placed advertisements in the local newspaper and put up notices in the general store and the church. The response was immediate and overwhelming. By the end of the first week, Penelope had bookings for a dozen family portraits. She set up a small studio in Mrs. Henderson's parlor, using the natural light from the large windows to create flattering compositions. Word of her skills spread quickly, and soon she was booked solid for weeks in advance. Kellan came to town every weekend, usually arriving Friday evening and staying until Sunday afternoon. He would help her with heavy equipment, run errands, and generally make himself useful. But mostly, they simply enjoyed being together. They would take walks along the Red River, have meals together, and talk for hours about everything and nothing. Penelope found herself falling for Kellan more with each visit. He was unlike any man she had ever known, combining strength with gentleness, confidence with humility. He treated her as an equal, respecting her intelligence and supporting her ambitions in a way that the Boston men of her acquaintance never had. They had expected her to set aside her interests once she married, to become merely a wife and mother. Kellan encouraged her to pursue her dreams while making it clear he wanted to be part of her life. It was on a beautiful September afternoon, nearly a month after their first meeting, that Penelope realized she was in love with him. They were sitting by the river, watching the water flow past when Kellan took her hand. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. "These past few weeks, getting to know you, watching you build your business, spending time with you, it has all made me realize something. I am falling in love with you, Penny. Maybe I have been since the moment I pulled you out of that flood. I know it is fast, and I know you have your business to think about, but I needed you to know how I feel." Penelope's heart soared. She turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "I am in love with you too," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I have been trying to tell myself it is too soon, that I barely know you, but my heart knows what it wants. You are good and kind, and you make me feel safe and cherished. I love you, Kellan James." Kellan's face broke into a wide smile, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I was so worried you would say it was too soon," he murmured into her hair, "that you would want to wait." "Life is too short for waiting," Penelope said, thinking of her parents, of how quickly everything could be taken away. "When you know, and I know I want to spend my life with you." Kellan pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" "I am saying yes, if you are asking," Penelope replied with a smile. "I am asking," Kellan said, and then he kissed her. It was Penelope's first real kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more. Kellan's lips were warm and soft, the kiss gentle but filled with promise. She wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, pouring all her love and hope and happiness into that perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kellan rested his forehead against hers. "We should do this properly," he said. "I should get you a ring, ask permission from Mrs. Henderson since she is the closest thing you have to family here. We should plan a wedding." "We should," Penelope agreed. "But right now, I just want to sit here with you and be happy." So they did, sitting by the river as the sun set, talking about their future together. They decided that Penelope would continue her photography business in Fargo, while Kellan would manage the ranch. She could travel out to the Double J whenever her schedule allowed, and he would continue to come to town on weekends when the ranch work permitted. It would not be easy, but they were both willing to make it work. The engagement was announced the following week, and Mrs. Henderson threw a small party to celebrate. The widow had become quite fond of Penelope and approved heartily of Kellan, declaring him a fine young man who would take good care of her charge. The other boarders, all single working women, were delighted by the romance, and several insisted on being photographed with the happy couple. They were married 6 weeks later in late October at the small church in Fargo. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with Mrs. Henderson standing in as Penelope's mother figure and Kellan's 2 ranch hands serving as witnesses. Penelope wore a simple but elegant dress she had purchased from the dressmaker in town, and Kellan wore his best suit. But it was the looks on their faces that everyone remembered, the pure joy and love that shone from both of them. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the boarding house, with food and dancing and much celebrating. Penelope's photography clients all came, along with many of the townspeople who had gotten to know the couple over the past 2 months. It was a warm and happy occasion, and Penelope felt overwhelmed by the sense of community and belonging. That night, Kellan took his bride to a hotel in town, the nicest accommodation available in Fargo. It was the first time they had been truly alone together, and both were nervous. But as Kellan took Penelope in his arms and kissed her gently, the nervousness melted away, replaced by love and trust and desire. "I love you, Mrs. James," Kellan whispered against her lips. "I love you too," Penelope whispered back. "My husband." The word felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. She was a married woman now, with a husband who loved and cherished her, who supported her dreams and wanted to build a life with her. As Kellan kissed her again, more deeply this time, Penelope sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the flash flood that had brought them together. The next morning, they returned to the Double J together. It was Penelope's first time seeing the ranch since that dramatic night after the flood, and she was struck again by its beauty. The house sat in a sheltered valley, surrounded by gently rolling prairie. The autumn grass was golden in the morning sun, and cattle dotted the landscape. "Welcome home," Kellan said, helping her down from the wagon they had rented to transport her belongings. "Home," Penelope repeated, trying out the word. It felt right. The next few months were a period of adjustment for both of them. Penelope divided her time between the ranch and Fargo, usually spending 3 days a week in town taking portraits and the rest of the time at the Double J. She set up a small darkroom in one of the outbuildings and spent her free time photographing the ranch, the prairie, and Kellan at work. She captured images of him on horseback, mending fences, working with the cattle. She photographed the changing seasons, the way the light hit the grass at different times of day, the storms rolling in from the west. Kellan, for his part, worked hard to make the ranch successful. He expanded his herd, hired another hand to help with the increased workload, and began planning for the future. He built an addition onto the house, creating a proper studio and darkroom for Penelope so she could work from home more easily. He supported her photography business completely, even when it meant spending days apart. Their first winter together was harsh, as Dakota winters tended to be. There were times when Penelope was stranded at the ranch for weeks, unable to get to town because of snow and cold. But she did not mind. She loved the cozy evenings by the fire, curled up with Kellan, reading or talking or simply being together. She loved waking up next to him every morning, feeling safe and warm despite the blizzard howling outside. By spring, they had settled into a comfortable routine. Penelope's photography business was thriving, with clients coming from as far as Bismarck to have their portraits taken. She had even started receiving requests from magazines back east for photographs of frontier life, which meant she could combine her artistic photography with her commercial work. The loan from Kellan had been paid back in full within 6 months, though he had tried to refuse repayment. "You are my wife," he had protested. "What is mine is yours. And what is mine, Penelope had replied firmly. "You took a risk on me, and I want to repay that faith properly. Besides, it makes me feel good to have earned my own way." Kellan had understood, even as he teased her about her stubborn independence. It was one of the things he loved most about her, that determination to succeed on her own merits. It was on a warm evening in June, almost a year after they had met, that Penelope set up her camera on the porch of their home. Kellan was coming in from the range, riding Duke across the prairie with the setting sun behind him. It was a scene she had witnessed hundreds of times, but tonight it struck her as particularly beautiful. She positioned her camera and waited for the perfect moment. Kellan rode closer, his silhouette sharp against the golden sky. At exactly the right moment, Penelope pressed the shutter release, capturing the image on the glass plate. She knew immediately that it was special, perhaps the best photograph she had ever taken. Later, after dinner, Kellan found her in the darkroom, developing the plate from earlier. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder to watch as the image emerged in the developing solution. "That is a good one," he said softly. "It is more than good," Penelope replied, studying the photograph with satisfaction. "It is perfect. The composition, the light, everything. This is the kind of image I came west to capture." She turned in his arms to face him, her eyes shining. "You know, I have been thinking about that day we met, how terrified I was, how certain I was going to die. And then you appeared like something out of a dream and saved me. I lost my camera and all my work that day, but I gained something so much more valuable." "What is that?" Kellan asked, though his smile suggested he already knew. "You," Penelope said simply. "I came out here looking for beautiful landscapes to photograph, for the perfect images that would make my name as an artist. But what I found was you. You are my greatest discovery, Kellan James. Not the Badlands or the prairie or any photograph I could ever take. You." Kellan pulled her close, emotion thick in his throat. "I love you so much, Penny. You came into my life like a storm, unexpected and powerful, and changed everything. I was content before, happy with my ranch and my quiet life. But now I cannot imagine existing without you. You are my home more than this house or this land. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." They kissed, long and deep, there in the red glow of the darkroom. When they finally broke apart, Penelope took Kellan's hand and placed it on her stomach. "There is something else I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling with happiness and nervousness. "I have been waiting for the right moment, and I think this is it. We are going to have a baby, Kellan. In December, if the doctor is right." Kellan's eyes went wide, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. Then a huge smile spread across his face, and he let out a whoop of joy that probably startled the horses in the barn. He picked Penelope up and spun her around, careful to set her down gently when he remembered her condition. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Penny, that is the most wonderful news I have ever heard. Well, except for when you said you would marry me. But this is a very close second." Penelope laughed, happier than she had ever been in her life. "I am so glad you are happy. I was a little worried about the timing. The business is doing so well, and I know you have plans for the ranch." "The timing is perfect," Kellan assured her. "We will make it work. We always do. A baby, Penny, our baby. I cannot wait to meet him or her." The next months passed in a blur of preparation. Kellan started building a nursery in the upstairs room next to their bedroom, crafting a beautiful cradle with his own hands. Penelope continued taking photographs, though she reduced her schedule as her pregnancy progressed. She trained a young woman from town named Sarah to assist her, someone who could take over the portrait business temporarily after the baby was born. Mrs. Henderson was beside herself with excitement, knitting baby clothes and offering endless advice about child care. The ranch hands built toys in their spare time, including a small rocking horse that made Kellan laugh and shake his head at their enthusiasm. In mid-December, during a gentle snowfall, Penelope went into labor. Mrs. Henderson had come out to the ranch the week before to help with the birth, bringing with her a midwife from town. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Kellan paced in the room downstairs, alternating between praying and cursing his helplessness. Finally, just as the sun was setting on the shortest day of the year, a baby's cry pierced the air. The midwife came down to get Kellan, her face creased in a tired smile. "You have a son," she said. "A big, healthy boy, and your wife is asking for you." Kellan took the stairs 2 at a time and burst into the bedroom. Penelope was propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion. But she was smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blue blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Kellan approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Penelope pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. The baby's eyes were closed, and he was making small mewing sounds that went straight to Kellan's heart. "He is perfect," Kellan whispered, reaching out to gently touch the baby's impossibly small hand. The tiny fingers immediately curled around his much larger finger, gripping with surprising strength. "He is absolutely perfect. I was thinking we could name him Kenneth," Penelope said. "After my father, Kenneth James. What do you think?" "I think that is a fine name," Kellan said, blinking back tears. "Welcome to the world, Kenneth James. You have the best mother in the world, and I promise to be the best father I can be." The baby, as if understanding his father's words, opened his eyes for a moment, revealing blue-gray eyes that would eventually change color. Then he yawned, a tiny perfect yawn, and snuggled against his mother's chest. "You should rest," Kellan said to Penelope. "You have been through an ordeal." "I will rest soon," Penelope promised. "But first, I just want to look at him. Look at what we made. Is he not the most beautiful thing you have ever seen?" "Second most beautiful," Kellan corrected, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and putting his arm around his wife. "You are still number 1. Penelope laughed softly and leaned against him, and they sat together, the 3 of them, watching the snow fall outside the window as their family officially began. The first year of Kenneth's life was challenging but wonderful. Penelope discovered that she loved being a mother, though it was harder than she had anticipated. The sleepless nights, the constant feeding, the worry that came with being responsible for such a tiny, helpless life, it was all-consuming in a way she had not expected. But it was also deeply fulfilling. She still took photographs, though less frequently. She found herself drawn to photographing Kenneth as he grew and changed, documenting every milestone. She also discovered a new market for her work photographs of family life on the frontier that she could sell to Eastern magazines. Her authentic images of motherhood and ranch life found an eager audience among readers curious about the West. Kellan was a devoted father, taking to the role with the same steady competence he brought to everything else. He would spend hours with Kenneth, talking to him about the ranch, the cattle, the weather, anything and everything. He built toys, told stories, and was always there for the nighttime feedings, giving Penelope a chance to rest. As Kenneth grew from an infant to a toddler, the little boy showed signs of having inherited the best qualities of both his parents. He had Kellan's blue-green eyes and Penelope's artistic temperament. He loved being outside, following his father around the ranch, but he also loved sitting with his mother while she worked in her darkroom, fascinated by the way images appeared on the blank plates. Penelope's photography business continued to thrive. She had established herself as the premier photographer in the region, with clients coming from all over the territory. She had also begun exhibiting her artistic work in galleries back east, gaining recognition for her powerful images of frontier life. Several of her photographs had been published in national magazines, bringing attention to the Dakota Territory and to her skills as an artist. The Double J Ranch also prospered under Kellan's management. He had built the herd up to several hundred head of cattle and had acquired more land, expanding the ranch's footprint. He was respected in the community as a fair employer and an honest businessman. Together, Kellan and Penelope were building not just a life but a legacy. When Kenneth was 2 years old, Penelope found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier and she knew what to expect. In the spring of 1891, she gave birth to a daughter they named Patricia, after Penelope's mother. Patricia had Kellan's dark hair and Penelope's green eyes, and she was a calm, contented baby from the start. "Our family is complete," Penelope said, lying in bed with her newborn daughter while Kenneth peered curiously at his sister from Kellan's arms. "A boy and a girl. It is perfect." "It is," Kellan agreed, looking at his wife and children with overwhelming love. "More than I ever dreamed of." Life settled into a new rhythm with 2 children. Kenneth took his role as big brother seriously, always wanting to help with Patricia. As the children grew, the house filled with laughter and noise and life. Kellan built a bigger table to accommodate their growing family, and Penelope captured every moment with her camera, creating a visual record of their lives together. By the time Kenneth was 5 and Patricia was 3, Fargo had grown substantially. North Dakota had achieved statehood in 1889, and the region was booming. The railroad brought more settlers every month, and Fargo was transforming from a frontier town into a proper city. Penelope's photography business had expanded to the point where she had hired 2 assistants and opened a permanent studio in town. But despite the success and the growth, the heart of their lives remained the Double J. The ranch was where they felt most at home, most themselves. It was where they gathered as a family at the end of each day, where they made memories and built their future. One evening in late summer, as the sun was setting over the prairie, the whole family was gathered on the porch. Kenneth was playing with his toy horses, making them race across the wooden planks. Patricia was on Penelope's lap, already drowsy and ready for bed. Kellan sat next to them, his hand resting on Penelope's shoulder. "You ever think about that day we met?" Kellan asked quietly. "The flash flood." "I think about it all the time," Penelope replied. "I think about how close I came to dying, how different everything would be if you had not been there. And I think about how that terrible moment led to all of this, our marriage, our children. our life together. It is strange how the worst day of my life became the best day, all because of you." She reached up to cover his hand with hers. "You saved my life that day in more ways than one. I was so lost after my parents died, just drifting from place to place with my camera, documenting the world but not really living in it. And then you pulled me out of that flood, and suddenly I had a reason to live again. You gave me love, a family, a home. Everything I have, everything I am now, I owe to you." "You give me too much credit," Kellan said softly. "You saved yourself, Penny. You had the courage to come out here alone, to chase your dreams, to build a life on your terms. All I did was give you a hand up when you needed it. Everything else you did yourself." "We did it together," Penelope corrected. "That is what makes it special. We are a team, partners in everything. I could not have done any of this without you, and I would not want to. You are still my greatest discovery, Kellan. Every day with you is a gift." Kellan leaned over and kissed her gently, careful not to disturb Patricia, who had fallen asleep. "I love you, Penny James, more today than yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "That is beautiful," Penelope said with a smile. "Did you think of that yourself?" "I did," Kellan admitted proudly. "I have been working on being more romantic." "You are plenty romantic just as you are," Penelope assured him, "but I appreciate the effort." Kenneth looked up from his toys. "Papa, why are you kissing Mama?" "Because I love her very much," Kellan said simply. "And someday, when you are all grown up, you will find someone you love just as much and you will want to kiss them too." "Yuck," Kenneth said, making a face. "I am never getting married." Kellan and Penelope exchanged amused glances. "We will see about that," Kellan said. "You might change your mind in about 20 years. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, the James family went inside. Kellan carried a sleeping Patricia upstairs while Penelope helped Kenneth get ready for bed. These evening routines were precious to both parents, these quiet moments with their children before the next busy day began. Later, after the children were asleep, Kellan and Penelope stood together in the doorway of the nursery, watching Patricia sleep. The little girl was sprawled on her back, arms flung wide, completely at peace. "She looks like you when she sleeps," Kellan whispered. "She looks like an angel," Penelope replied. "They both do. How did we get so lucky? Hard work, good timing, and a flash flood," Kellan said with a grin. Penelope turned to face him, putting her arms around his waist. "You know what tomorrow is?" "Wednesday." "It is the 5th anniversary of the day we met," Penelope said. 5 years since you rode down into that canyon and saved my life. 5 years since everything changed." 5 years, Kellan repeated thoughtfully. "It feels like both longer and shorter than that. Longer because I cannot imagine my life without you, shorter because every day seems to go by so fast." "I feel the same way," Penelope said. "Time is strange like that. But I am grateful for every minute we have had together, and I am looking forward to all the minutes still to come." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Kellan spoke again. "You know, I never told you this, but I almost did not ride down into that canyon. Duke was already tired, and I was thinking it would be smarter to go around to get home faster. But something made me go that way, some instinct or fate or divine intervention. And I am so grateful I listened to whatever it was." "I believe things happen for a reason," Penelope said. "Maybe we were meant to find each other. Maybe that flash flood, as terrible as it was the universe's way of bringing us together. I lost my camera and my photographs that day, but I found you. And that was the trade I needed to make, even though I did not know it at the time." "No regrets then?" Kellan asked. "Not a single one," Penelope said firmly. "This life we have built together, it is better than anything I could have imagined. Better than any photograph I could have taken. You, our children, this home, this is my masterpiece. This is what I was meant to create." They kissed then, a long, slow kiss full of love and promise and history. 5 years of marriage, 2 children, countless challenges overcome together. And it was just the beginning. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and growth. Kenneth grew into a thoughtful, hard-working boy who loved the ranch and showed signs of following in his father's footsteps. Patricia developed a keen eye for beauty and composition, often accompanying her mother on photography trips. Penelope began teaching her daughter the art of photography, passing down her skills and passion. The Double J continued to prosper, becoming one of the most successful ranches in the region. Kellan's reputation for fair dealing and quality cattle spread far beyond North Dakota, and he began selling breeding stock to ranchers across the western states. He never forgot his roots, though, and always made time to help neighboring ranchers, remembering how others had helped him when he was starting out. Penelope's photography career reached new heights. She had become nationally known for her portraits and her documentary photographs of frontier life. Her work was exhibited in major cities, and she had published several collections of photographs in book form. But she never lost sight of what was most important: her family and the life they had built together. When Kenneth turned 7, Kellan began teaching him to ride in earnest. The boy was a natural, fearless but careful, with good instincts about horses. Watching his son learn to ride, Kellan often thought about his own father, who had taught him the same skills back in Texas. There was something profoundly satisfying about passing down these traditions, about knowing that the ranch would continue into the next generation. Patricia, at 5 years old, was already showing an artistic temperament that mirrored her mother's. She would spend hours arranging flowers or rocks into pleasing compositions, studying the way light fell across different surfaces. Penelope recognized her own younger self in her daughter and nurtured that creative spark carefully. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kellan surprised Penelope with a gift. He had commissioned a local craftsman to build her a new camera, a top-of-the-line model incorporating all the latest technological advances. It was beautiful, with polished wood and brass fittings, far superior to anything she had owned before. "Kellan, this must have cost a fortune," Penelope said, running her hands over the smooth wood. "You are worth it," Kellan replied simply. "You lost your camera saving your life, and while I do not regret that for a second, I always felt like you deserved a proper replacement. Consider it 10 years overdue." Penelope threw her arms around him, kissing him enthusiastically. "Thank you, not just for the camera, but for everything. For supporting my work, for believing in me, for being the best husband and father I could imagine." "Right back at you," Kellan said with a grin. "Best wife and mother, bar none." That evening they had a party to celebrate their anniversary. Mrs. Henderson came out from Fargo, along with Kellan's ranch hands and their families, and several of Penelope's photography clients who had become friends. It was a joyful gathering, full of good food, music, and laughter. As Penelope looked around at the people gathered in her home, at her husband laughing with friends, at her children playing with the other kids, she felt overwhelming gratitude. This was what she had been searching for during those lonely months after her parents died, though she had not known it at the time. Not just a place, but a community. Not just a house, but a home filled with love. Later, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Kellan and Penelope sat together on the porch, watching the stars. It was their favorite time of day, these quiet moments alone together after the business of the day was done. "You ever miss Boston?" Kellan asked. It was a question he had asked before, usually on their anniversary, as if he needed reassurance that she was happy with the choice she had made. "Not even a little bit," Penelope replied honestly. "Boston was where I came from, but this is where I belong, with you, with our children on this land. This is home, Kellan, the only real home I have ever had." "Good," Kellan said, pulling her closer, "because I cannot imagine being anywhere else with anyone else. You are stuck with me, Mrs. James." "I can think of worse fates," Penelope said with a laugh. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying being together. Then Penelope spoke again. "You know what I was thinking about today? That photograph I took of you riding in from the range, the one I made the first summer we were married. I still think it is one of the best photographs I have ever taken. There was something about that image, the way you were silhouetted against the sky, that captured something essential about you. Your strength, your connection to this land, your purpose. Every time I look at it, I fall in love with you all over again." "You are going to make me blush," Kellan said, though he was clearly pleased. "I am just a cowboy doing his work, nothing special." "You are everything special," Penelope corrected. "To me, to our children, to everyone whose lives you touch. You might see yourself as just a cowboy, but I see so much more. I see a man who risked his life to save a stranger. A man who supported his wife's unconventional career without question. A father who teaches his children not just skills but values. A neighbor who helps others without expecting anything in return. You are a good man, Kellan James, and I am so proud to be your wife." Kellan was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I do not know what I did to deserve you, Penny, but I thank God for you every single day. You came into my life like a miracle, and you have made every day since better than the one before. I love you more than I have words to express." "Then show me instead," Penelope whispered, standing and holding out her hand. Kellan took her hand and let her lead him inside, up the stairs to their bedroom. 10 years of marriage had not dimmed their passion for each other. If anything, it had deepened it. They knew each other's bodies, each other's desires, in a way that made their lovemaking both comfortable and exciting. As they lay together afterward, Penelope traced patterns on Kellan's chest. "Do you think we will have more children?" she asked. "Would you want to?" Kellan replied, surprised. "I thought you said our family was complete." "I did say that," Penelope admitted, "and I was content with that decision. But lately, I have been thinking about how much I enjoyed Kenneth and Patricia when they were babies. How quickly they grew up. I suppose I am feeling a bit nostalgic." "We could," Kellan said thoughtfully, "if that is what you want. Though I have to admit the sleepless nights and constant diaper changes are not my favorite memories." Penelope laughed. "That is true. Maybe I am just being sentimental. 2 children is plenty. Besides, my photography work is busier than ever, and I do not know if I could manage a baby and the business both." "Whatever you decide, I am with you," Kellan promised. "More children, no more children, it is all fine by me. I am happy with whatever makes you happy." "I am happy now," Penelope said, snuggling closer. "Right here, right now, this is perfect." The decision about more children was taken out of their hands a few months later when Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. At first she was worried about the timing, but Kellan was delighted, and his enthusiasm quickly won her over. Kenneth and Patricia were excited about the prospect of a new baby, already arguing over names and making plans. This pregnancy was different from the first 2. Penelope was older now, 32 to be exact, and she found herself more tired than she had been with her previous pregnancies. She had to cut back significantly on her photography work, leaving most of the portrait business to her assistants. But she remained cheerful and optimistic, looking forward to meeting the new addition to their family. In the spring of 1894, on a bright April morning, Penelope gave birth to another son. The delivery was quick and relatively easy compared to Kenneth's difficult birth, and the baby was healthy and strong. They named him Kyle, and from the moment he drew his first breath, he was clearly going to be a handful. He was loud, energetic, and demanding in a way neither of his older siblings had been. "I think this one is going to keep us on our toes," Kellan said, watching his youngest son wave his fists and yell lustily. "I think you are right," Penelope agreed, trying to nurse the squirming infant. "But I would not have it any other way." Kenneth, now 8 years old, was fascinated by his new brother. He helped as much as he could, fetching diapers and singing songs to entertain the baby. Patricia, at 6, was more reserved, a bit jealous of the attention the baby was receiving but trying to hide it. Penelope made sure to spend special time with each of her older children, reassuring them that they were just as loved and important as the new baby. The first year of Kyle's life was exhausting but wonderful. Penelope had forgotten how much work a baby was, how all-consuming. But she had also forgotten the joy of those tiny smiles, the satisfaction of soothing a crying infant, the miracle of watching a personality emerge day by day. Kyle was stubborn and strong-willed, but also affectionate and funny. He kept the whole family entertained with his antics. As the children grew, the James family became even more tightly knit. Kenneth began taking on real responsibilities around the ranch, working alongside his father and learning the business. Patricia continued to develop her artistic eye, and Penelope began teaching her photography in earnest when she turned 10. Kyle, still young, followed his siblings around adoringly, wanting to do everything they did. Penelope's photography business evolved as her children grew older. She took on fewer portrait clients, but focused more on her artistic work, creating powerful series of photographs documenting life in North Dakota at the turn of the century. Her work was increasingly recognized nationally, with exhibitions in major cities and features in prominent magazines. She had become one of the most respected photographers in the country, male or female, a rare achievement for a woman in that era. But despite her professional success, Penelope never lost sight of what was most important. She was always there for her children's important moments, always made time for her husband, always put her family first. Her career was important to her, but it was not more important than the people she loved. Kellan, too, found the right balance between work and family. The Double J was now one of the premier ranches in the region, but he never let the business consume him. He made sure to be present for his children, to teach them and guide them and simply enjoy their company. He and Penelope maintained a strong partnership, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating successes together. On a beautiful summer evening in 1900, the entire family gathered on the porch to watch the sunset. Kenneth was now 15, tall and strong, clearly on his way to becoming a man. Patricia, at 13, was turning into a lovely young woman with her mother's grace and her father's steady temperament. Kyle, at 6, was still full of energy and mischief, but showing signs of the fine man he would become. "Can you believe it has been almost 15 years since we met?" Penelope asked Kellan quietly, watching their children play in the yard. 15 years, Kellan repeated, shaking his head. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday, and sometimes it feels like you have always been part of my life." "You changed my life completely," Penelope said. "Before I met you, I was just drifting, taking photographs but not really living. You taught me how to be happy, how to build a life worth living. You gave me everything I have: this home, our children, a purpose beyond just my work." "You give me too much credit again," Kellan protested. "You were already an amazing woman when I met you." Brave enough to come out here alone, talented enough to build a successful business, strong enough to survive that flood. I just got lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time." "It was not luck," Penelope said firmly. "It was fate. We were meant to find each other, meant to build this life together. I am absolutely certain of that." She turned to look at him, her eyes shining with love. "You are still my greatest discovery, Kellan, not just that day in the canyon, but every day since. Every morning I wake up next to you, I discover something new to love about you. The way you are with our children, the way you run the ranch, the way you look at me like I am the most precious thing in the world. You are my greatest discovery, and you always will be." Kellan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "And you are mine. My greatest discovery, my greatest love, my greatest blessing. I love you, Penny James, more than life itself." They sat together watching the sun set, surrounded by the laughter of their children, secure in the knowledge that they had built something lasting and beautiful together. The flash flood that had brought them together was long ago, but its effects rippled forward through their lives, through their children, through the legacy they were creating together. Kenneth would eventually take over the Double J, running it with the same integrity and skill his father had taught him. He would marry a schoolteacher from Fargo and have 4 children of his own, expanding the James family. Patricia would become a respected photographer in her own right, eventually taking over her mother's business and building it into a thriving studio that employed several photographers. She would document the changing face of North Dakota through the early 20th century, creating a visual record that would be preserved in museums. Kyle would surprise everyone by becoming a veterinarian, using his natural affinity with animals to build a successful practice serving ranchers throughout the region. But all of that was still in the future. For now, on this perfect summer evening, the James family was together and happy, enjoying the simple pleasure of each other's company. Penelope looked at her husband, at her children, at the home they had built together, and felt profound gratitude. She had come west looking for photographs to take, for landscapes to capture, for the perfect image that would make her reputation. Instead, she had found love, family, and home. She had found Kellan, who had saved her life and then made that life worth living. She had found a place where she belonged, where she could be both an artist and a wife, a mother and a professional, without having to choose one over the other. She had found everything she had ever wanted, even the things she had not known she wanted. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, Kellan stood and held out his hand to Penelope. "Come on, Mrs. James. Let us get these children to bed so we can have some time alone." Penelope took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. Together, they herded their children inside, beginning the nightly routine of baths and bedtime stories and tucking in. It was ordinary and mundane, these everyday tasks of family life, but Penelope treasured them. This was what she had been missing in her life before Kellan, these simple moments of connection and love. Later, much later, when all 3 children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Kellan and Penelope returned to the porch. The night was warm and clear, with a million stars visible in the dark Dakota sky. They sat close together, Penelope's head on Kellan's shoulder, his arm around her waist. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if I had not come along that day?" Kellan asked. "If you had managed to get out of the canyon on your own somehow." "I try not to," Penelope admitted, "because thinking about a life without you is too painful, but sometimes I do wonder. I suppose I would have continued taking photographs, traveling from place to place, never really settling anywhere. I would have been successful, maybe, but lonely, empty. I would have had a career but not a life." She lifted her head to look at him. "What about you?" What would your life have been like without me? Quiet, Kellan said immediately. Productive, I suppose. I would have built up the ranch, maybe married eventually, had a family, but it would not have been the same. You brought color and joy and passion into my life. You challenged me, supported me, loved me in ways I did not know I needed. Without you, I would have just been going through the motions, living but not really alive. We saved each other, Penelope said softly. That day in the canyon, you saved my life. But in all the days since, I think I saved yours too in a different way. We were both incomplete before we met, and together we became whole. That is beautiful, Kellan said, and true. We were meant to find each other, Penny. I am absolutely certain of that. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, the chirp of crickets, the distant call of an owl, the soft whicker of horses in the barn. This land, this place, had become as much a part of them as they were of it. The Double J was not just a ranch. It was the physical manifestation of their love, their hard work, their dreams made real. I want to take a photograph of us, Penelope said suddenly. A proper portrait, the whole family together. I have hundreds of photographs of the children, dozens of you, but almost none of all of us together. I want to document this moment in time, capture it forever. That sounds like a fine idea, Kellan agreed. When? Soon. Next week maybe, when the light is good. We could do it right here, on the porch with the prairie behind us. Our home, our land, our family. It would be perfect. You are going to need someone to operate the camera, Kellan pointed out, unless you have figured out how to be in front of and behind the lens at the same time. Penelope laughed. Patricia is old enough now. She has been learning the technical side of photography. I trust her to capture the image I want. The following week, on a perfect June morning, the James family gathered on the porch for their portrait. Everyone was dressed in their Sunday best, hair neatly combed and faces scrubbed clean. Patricia set up her mother's camera on its tripod, carefully composing the shot exactly as Penelope had instructed. Kellan sat in the center, tall and proud, with Penelope standing beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Kenneth stood on his father's other side, already nearly as tall as Kellan. Patricia positioned herself next to her mother after setting up the shot with a timer mechanism that would give her time to get in place. Kyle sat on the step at his parents' feet, grinning widely. The shutter clicked, capturing the moment forever. When Patricia developed the plate later that day, Penelope knew immediately that it was special. The love and connection between the 5 people in the photograph was palpable, visible in every detail. This was not just a record of what they looked like, but of who they were, a family bound together by love and strengthened by the challenges they had overcome together. Penelope had the photograph printed and framed, and it hung in the place of honor above the fireplace in the main room. Every time she looked at it, she was reminded of how blessed she was, of how far she had come from that terrified young woman in the canyon. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges. There were harsh winters that tested their endurance, droughts that threatened the ranch, economic downturns that required careful management. But through it all, Kellan and Penelope faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger with each challenge overcome. They watched their children grow up and begin lives of their own. Kenneth married at 23, bringing his bride home to the ranch and beginning the next generation. Patricia opened her own photography studio in Fargo at 21, quickly building a reputation that equaled her mother's. Kyle went off to veterinary school in Minneapolis, though he promised to return to North Dakota to practice. As their children left home and started their own families, Kellan and Penelope found themselves alone together again, much as they had been in the early days of their marriage. But now they had decades of shared history, of memories and experiences that bound them together even more tightly. "We have done well," Kellan said one evening as they sat on the porch, a ritual that had never changed in over 20 years of marriage. "Our children are happy and healthy, the ranch is prosperous, and we are still madly in love with each other. I would say we succeeded at this life thing." "We did," Penelope agreed, "though it was not always easy." "The best things never are," Kellan replied, "but would you change anything? If you could go back and do it all over again, would you change any of it?" Penelope thought about that seriously. There had been hard times, certainly. Difficult births, sick children, financial worries, droughts and storms, and all the challenges that came with building a life on the frontier. But all of those challenges had shaped them, strengthened them, made them who they were. "No," she said finally. "I would not change a single thing. Every struggle we faced together brought us closer. Every challenge we overcame made us stronger. Even the bad times were worthwhile because we went through them together." She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her life all those years ago. He was older now, his hair touched with gray at the temples, lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. But he was still the same Kellan she had fallen in love with, still strong and steady and kind. "You are still my greatest discovery," she said softly. "After all these years, after everything we have been through together, that has not changed. You are still the best thing that ever happened to me. The flash flood took my camera, but it gave me you, and that was more than a fair trade." Kellan pulled her close, kissing her with all the passion and tenderness of their early days. "And you are mine. My greatest discovery, my greatest love, my greatest adventure. Marrying you was the best decision I ever made, and I would make it again in a heartbeat." They sat together as the sun set, watching the familiar landscape turn gold and pink in the fading light. This view, this place, these quiet moments together, this was what life was really about. Not the grand adventures or the professional successes or the accumulation of wealth, but these simple moments of connection and love. Kenneth and his wife gave them 5 grandchildren over the next decade, bringing new life and energy to the Double J. Patricia married a fellow photographer and had 3 children, dividing her time between Fargo and frequent visits to the ranch. Kyle returned from veterinary school as promised and set up a practice in Fargo, eventually marrying and having 2 children of his own. Kellan and Penelope loved being grandparents, enjoying the time with their grandchildren without the full responsibility of parenting. They could spoil the children, play with them, and then send them home to their parents. It was, they both agreed, the perfect arrangement. As they moved into their 50s and then their 60s, Kellan and Penelope began to slow down. The ranch was now primarily run by Kenneth, though Kellan still helped with the work as much as his aging body allowed. Penelope had turned most of the photography business over to Patricia, though she still took photographs for her own enjoyment, documenting the changing world around her. They spent more time together, taking long walks across the prairie, sitting on the porch in the evenings, traveling occasionally to visit their children and grandchildren. After more than 35 years of marriage, they were still deeply in love, still each other's best friend and closest confidant. "I am a lucky man," Kellan said one evening as they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. The whole family had gathered at the Double J for the occasion, and the house was full of children and grandchildren, noise and laughter and love. "Lucky," Penelope repeated with a smile. "Is that all?" "Blessed," Kellan corrected. "Fortunate beyond measure. Married to the most wonderful woman in the world, father to 3 amazing children, grandfather to 10 beautiful grandchildren. Living in this place we built together, surrounded by everything we have created. How could I ask for anything more?" You could not, Penelope agreed, leaning against him. Because we have everything that matters. Love, family, health, a lifetime of memories. We are rich beyond measure, even if our wealth is not measured in money. That night, after all the guests had left and the house was quiet again, Kellan and Penelope stood in the main room, looking at the photographs that lined the walls. Penelope's entire career was represented here, from her earliest work to her most recent. But the photographs that drew her eye were the family pictures: Kenneth as a baby, Patricia on her first pony, Kyle learning to rope calves, the family portrait from that perfect June morning decades ago. "This is my real legacy," Penelope said, gesturing at the family photographs. "Not the ones in museums or magazines, but these. The visual record of our family, our love, our life together. This is what I want to be remembered for." "You will be remembered for all of it," Kellan said. "As a pioneering photographer who documented the West, and as a loving wife and mother who built a beautiful family. You do not have to choose one or the other. You did it all, Penny, and you did it brilliantly." "We did it all," Penelope corrected. "Together. That is the secret, Kellan. We did everything together, supporting each other, lifting each other up. That is why we succeeded when so many others failed. We were partners in the truest sense of the word." Kellan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. They stood like that for a long time, looking at the photographs, remembering all the moments they captured, feeling grateful for every minute they had been given together. The years continued to pass, though more slowly now. Kellan and Penelope moved through their 70s, their bodies aging but their minds still sharp. They had to give up some of the activities they had once enjoyed, but they found new pleasures in simpler things. Reading together by the fire, watching the grandchildren and great-grandchildren play, sitting on the porch and talking as they had been doing for more than half a century. On a beautiful summer evening in 1929, almost exactly 45 years after their first meeting, Kellan and Penelope sat on the porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 70s now, slowed by age but still together, still in love. "Do you remember," Penelope said softly, "that night after we were married, when I told you that you were my greatest discovery?" "I remember," Kellan replied. "You say it often, actually, never gets old hearing it. I was thinking today about all the discoveries I have made in my life. New places, new people, new techniques in photography. I have seen so much, experienced so much, learned so much. But nothing, not a single thing, compares to you. You are still, after all these years, the most important discovery I ever made. Finding you changed everything, made everything else possible." "I feel the same way," Kellan said, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "You gave me a life I never dreamed was possible. Love, family, partnership, adventure. You made me better than I would have been on my own." They sat in silence for a while, comfortable with each other in the way that only comes from decades of companionship. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was the kind of sunset Penelope had once traveled hundreds of miles to photograph, but now she just enjoyed it, letting the beauty wash over her without feeling the need to capture it. "I love you, Kellan James," she said softly. "More today than ever before, if that is even possible." "It is possible," Kellan replied, "because I feel the same way. I love you more every single day, Penny. You are my heart, my home, my everything." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, hands clasped, hearts entwined. Behind them, the house was quiet, all their children and grandchildren gone to their own homes. But the house was full of memories, of love, of a lifetime lived together. The Double J would continue for generations, passed down through the James family. Penelope's photographs would be preserved in museums and private collections, a testament to her artistic vision and her documentation of a vanishing way of life. But more importantly, the love she and Kellan had shared, the family they had built, would continue on through their descendants. 3 great-grandchildren were already born, with more on the way. The James family had grown and spread, but they all still came back to the Double J, to this place where it had all started, where Kellan and Penelope had built their life together. "We did good," Kellan said, as if reading her thoughts. "We built something that will last." "We did," Penelope agreed. "We built a legacy of love, and it all started with a flash flood and a cowboy brave enough to ride down into a canyon to save a stranger." "Best decision I ever made," Kellan said with a smile. "Best flood I ever survived," Penelope replied, and they both laughed. They sat together until the sky was fully dark, until the stars were bright overhead, until the moon rose silver and full. And then, finally, they went inside together as they had done every night for 45 years, ready to end another perfect day of a perfect life lived together. The story of the cowboy and the photographer, brought together by disaster and bound together by love, would be told and retold in the James family for generations. It would become legend, embellished with each telling, but the essential truth remained the same. 2 people, meant to find each other, building a life and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not the fame or the fortune, not the success or the accomplishments, but the love they had shared and the family they had built. That was their greatest achievement, their most important legacy, and it was more than enough. As Kellan and Penelope climbed the stairs to their bedroom that night, they moved slowly but surely, still together after all these years. They had weathered every storm, overcome every obstacle, and emerged stronger on the other side. Their love had not just survived but thrived, growing deeper and richer with each passing year. "Tomorrow," Penelope said as they got ready for bed, "I want to take some new photographs of the ranch, the land, the way the morning light hits the grass. I want to capture it all one more time." "Then tomorrow we will do that," Kellan promised. "Whatever you want, my love." They settled into bed, Kellan's arms around Penelope as they had been for thousands of nights before. Outside, the prairie stretched away under the stars, beautiful and timeless. Inside, the house that love had built stood strong, sheltering the family that love had created. And on the wall in the main room, the photograph of the James family still hung above the fireplace, a frozen moment of joy and love that had lasted through decades. 5 people looking at the camera, connected by bonds of blood and love that could never be broken. A cowboy, a photographer, and the family they had built together. It was a good life, a full life, a life well lived. And it had all started with a flash flood, a desperate rescue, and a moment of connection between 2 people who were meant to find each other. From that single moment, everything else had flowed: marriage, children, grandchildren, a lifetime of love and partnership. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Penelope's last conscious thought was the same as it had been for 45 years. She was the luckiest woman alive. She had found her greatest discovery, her truest love, her home. And nothing, absolutely nothing, could ever compare to that, the end.